If you're really doing it right, you're not charging for your time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Jeff Heilman Project, your go-to podcast for systematizing success. We are Jeff and Jessica Heilman, been married coming up on 30 years. There have been moments in time where we have needed to use some leverage in order to go from, I believe that they define entrepreneurship as being able to move things from a lower yield up to a higher yield. And that oftentimes includes leverage and being able to appropriately, see where you need leverage.
How did two guys that weigh 160 pounds apiece lift a 2,000-pound piano up the outside window of an apartment building? How do you do that? You do it with pulleys.
Yeah.
And leverage, right?
Yeah.
That's physical leverage. We're going to talk about financial leverage here today, but
I've watched so many of those documentaries of like the Egyptian tombs and you look at the obelisks and you look at the pyramids and one cannot escape the thought of using leverage or something stronger than you with just the right amount of pressure, just the right amount of torque in order to get something to move. And so that's what we're talking about. And I know that in startups, you have come across many instances in which you've needed to use tools or needed to apply pressure in just the right way in order to get things to move. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to talk a little bit more about that on today's podcast.
well, one of the best talks that I've ever seen. I remember the first time I watched it, I took 45 screenshots of slides from Alex Hermozi talking about leverage. It's effectively how Alex Hermozi went from age 26 and broke to $100 million net worth in 6 years. The cornerstone, what he talked about, was this pyramid right here, which is the Naval Ravikant articulation.
And we'll have Andrew put that up on the website too, so you can see it.
I've actually added one layer here, but I'll go through each of these. When you look at leverage, it's effectively you put in 1 unit of effort and you get 2 units or 5 units or 1.2 units of effort if you're looking at affiliate marketing through Facebook ads. If I can guarantee $1.10 in revenue for $1 of advertising with a product that has a zero product cost once it's built, I'll put $1 million a day into Facebook ads if I get $1,100,000 a day, because you can do that on revolving credit. On a credit card, you could put $50,000 or $100,000 and you get $110,000 a day. You can use that to pay the credit card minimum, and then boom, the next day you do it again, and pretty soon you are the bank playing with the house's money. So leverage is you put in 1 unit of effort and you get something more than 1 unit of pay back. I've been in sales for 30 years, my entire career, probably 35 years. Sales has allowed little bits of other people's labor, little bits of other people's capital, little bits of other people's software code, and little bits of some of other people's content or my content to produce a sale that gives upside on yield. And granted, CFOs know this. I've been in situations where I've had millions of dollars in commissions that were due to me, either not paid / stolen, or I've been fired before I could actually get the payout, which is illegal in some states. But if you do a year or 2 years worth of work and you have $1 million in commissions that's due from a deal that you're working on, that's asymmetric leverage by using little bits of lots of these little pieces. If you look at capital has taken different forms over time, but it really kicked in the late 1400s, early 1500s with the Medici family, basically figured out double entry accounting. And with double entry accounting, you could start charging interest and paying interest on cash. And so if you put $100 in and you get $5 back at the end of the year, that's leverage. It's not great leverage necessarily, but it's better than burying your $100 in the ground. And when you've already got labor coming in and you have more capital than you need, using money to make money becomes leverage. That's very interesting.
When I think about another leverage, I can't help but think about World War II, when all the boys were out fighting the good fight and the ladies, the Rosie the Riveters, keeping the homeland going into the machine shops and assembly line and leveraging the workforce that you have available to you. It's kind of like that concept of, looking at your resources. What have you got in your hand? And are you using what you've got in your hand? Can you leverage your current assets? And that's a big part of the Jeff Heilman project. And this podcast is encouraging you to be creative, think outside the box. If you want to go into that level of being in your own business or becoming a contractor or freelancing, breaking free from corporate America and get into your own deal, using leverage successfully by looking around at what do you have access to currently? How can you leverage that computer that you have? Everyone has a computer. Everyone has the ability to create a website.
I was having this conversation earlier this week with a friend, and they were talking about like, what are you doing? What are you doing for consulting? What are you doing for your business? What do you want to do next? And my point was like, look for the problems you can solve. Apartments, when people move out, they need to be cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing $120 an apartment. I noticed that the painters were making $200 an apartment, and we were in there for 6 hours and they were in there for 2 hours. So if I could do $200 on a job that took me 2 to 3 hours instead of $100 on a job that took me 6 hours, that was more leverage because you were solving a bigger problem that required a little bit more training. Then I found out I could make more money selling products for somebody else than I could selling services for myself.
Mm.
So the product itself starts to become leverage. Well, that's actually perfect timing because as we moved up our little leverage pyramid from labor to capital, the Medici family, understanding double entry accounting and bookkeeping, now we start to look at code or software code. The first job that I had moving any kind of software code that existed at all was in 1995 working for Elon and Kimball, but the code wasn't really done yet. So we were selling futures or vaporware. But the actual code that started working in January of 1999, I was selling a Nerite 2080, I think. It was a pin pad connected merchant account terminal for credit card processing for small businesses. And I think the cost on the terminal was $300 or $400 for us. And I was selling a lease for 48 months at $50, $60, $70, $80, or $90 a month for 48 months. So we made insane amounts of money doing that. And for anybody, if you still know my name and you bought a Nerite 2080 from me in 1999, I apologize if you felt that you were treated unfairly. And I wish I knew how much the cost on those was when I was actually
All I
selling them.
know is I remember that time, and I remember that was such a good exercise in taking our thought process from just what is the cost of the product to how much value are we adding? Like, what are we worth? What are you worth? You're there on call 24-hour-a-day contact to talk to the company, to troubleshoot. Like, it's such an important thing to also learn leveraging is how much do you leverage what your time is worth and how much value you're adding, because a product can be, $20 worth of imported materials and, $16 a month. But now you're being asked to probably charge $100 a month, $200 a month, and then being able to go, okay, how much is too much? What is not enough?
If you're really doing it right, you're not charging for your time. You're charging for leveraged outcomes. I'm working on some consulting opportunities right now, and the budget is sizable and the time frame is short. And I'm talking with a couple of my stakeholders, and I'm like, look, dollars per hour should be a cost. Dollars per hour is not our calculation of putting it together, right? Let's make our take in this based on how much we can actually profit from this, and then we'll figure out an hourly cost and pay people appropriately, and pay people a lot of money appropriately. But we need to get a certain amount of work done, and then when there's profit left over, we'll take retainers and then a bonus. When I think of pricing professional services, a great resource for that is Chapter 8 in $1 Million Consulting from Alan Weiss. The title of the chapter is "Why Would You Be as Dumb as an Attorney?" And it talks about why charging by the hour is not as good for you because you don't know how many hours you're going to get. It's not as good for the customer because they don't know how much you're going to charge them. It's much easier to just say you're based on a retainer. This is the amount. This is the outcome I'm looking for. And you figure out how to get those results for this dollar amount. And if there's not enough pad in there to protect you for that result, then shame on you. If there's more margin in it for you, then good job. But at least you're giving customers an outcome for a specific cost. There's no scope creep. There's no negotiating for how much more hours. I don't have to worry about a timesheet. Like, this is what I'm paying for. This is the outcome I want. And if there's scope creep beyond that, or if there's something beyond it, you have to figure it out on the vendor side. If there's margin because you're efficient and effective in what you're doing and it's within my budget, I don't care how much profit you make. And so this is the engagement. Like, if we have $1 million consulting engagement and it costs us $300,000 to deliver it, and we split the 700, great. And if we can get that done in 3 or 4 months, and if I'm splitting $700,000 for 3 months worth of work, that's pretty good. Right. And some people could say, well, yeah, but that's not competitive. Well, really? Because if the budget is there and they have an outcome, and I were to go to a competitive Big Four or a super high HBR backed boutique firm, they're going to charge a lot more than that. And they probably will not guarantee the results. And they'll have 10 times the amount of red tape and red lines and paperwork in order to protect their business, because they're not thinking like entrepreneurs. The best leverage you can have is an entrepreneurial mindset and financial education. Because if you don't have that, you don't understand labor in the first place. Why would I want to hire a bunch of employees? Because you'd get rich if you did it right. But you'd have to have financial accounting or financial education, the ability to read a balance sheet or read an income statement and know what that means. I remember in the book How to Be Rich, not How to Get Rich, How to Be Rich by J. Paul Getty, he said, I'd rather have 1% of 100 man's efforts than 100% of my own. And I agree. 100% of one man's efforts, if one man gets sick, you lose 100% of your income that day or that week or that month. Or if they die, you lose it for life. But if you have 1% of 100 man's efforts, then 10 people can get sick and your income only takes a hit by 10%.
The best book that I think that I've ever read on getting your mindset towards beginning to think like an entrepreneur was, I believe it's Circle of Innovation by Tom Peters. Very way that the book was printed. It's like there's like words that are capitalized that aren't supposed to be capitalized. There's entire pages that are artwork. And you're going, this book itself is going to just shake up the way that you think towards business and how you think. And then I think that the second most are the Freakonomic books. Those two books, when you want to just, if you're sitting there thinking, if you're listening to this and thinking, man, I'm so tired of the status quo, and I'm an engineer, or I'm a product manager, or I'm a buyer planner, or I'm a whatever, and you're just doing the same thing day in and day out, and you've always dreamed about other people who think outside the box and how they get started thinking outside the box, go and find some radical thinking entrepreneurs that are just going to challenge the way that you potentially look at things, because now you're leveraging knowledge. Now you're when you begin reading books and you begin looking out and seeking the people that are the world shakers out there, like in Circle of Innovation, like in Freakonomics, then you begin to start seeing things in a whole new light and start leveraging the knowledge that you've been given access to.
Those books come alongside, and I actually upgraded my drawing here. I think the base of the pyramid is really an entrepreneurial mindset and financial education. That's the foundation. If you have that, you can learn the other four. If you have the other four, but you don't have the financial education and the entrepreneurial mindset, you're not going to make decisions in line with improving leverage, no matter how many great tools you have. However, if you start making bad decisions and you watch leverage that's working for you, that's bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars a month or millions into your business, and you start making bad decisions and you see that income go down, you'll go get the financial education really fast. Most people don't have that. Most people have a job mentality, and they think that they will work for somebody else until they die, and they don't expect to get fired or laid off, which has happened to me 3 dozen times. I just expect it. Like, I know I'm going to get fired or laid off at some point, and that the job itself is going to end, and that job ending is not a reflection of how good a person you are or how good a job. I've been number one sales rep in big companies before, and had jobs end for lots of different reasons. They could be acquisitions, they could be divestitures, it could be personality or politics. Your performance does matter. It is harder to get rid of somebody who is a top performer than it is somebody who's a bottom dweller, but it's not a guarantee. And you should know that. Doubling down on an entrepreneurial mindset, first of all, what's an entrepreneurial mindset? Let's talk about that for a minute. Number one, I'm responsible. Number two, I'm responsible. Number 3, I'm responsible. Period. I'm not a victim. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not going to whine. I'm not going to roll over and wet myself. I'm going to get up and go to work, and I'm going to do what I have to do to take responsibility for my family. Tell the story, if you can, about Steve Harvey.
Steve Harvey, who had been successful in Hollywood and
Showtime at the Apollo for
successful
15 years.
comedian. He had blindly trusted the accountant to be doing the accounting. That's a big thing I've noticed of these entrepreneurs, the Phil Vishers of this world who end up trusting other people because they don't feel like they're fully equipped in order to do all of the jobs, and so they trust people to do those jobs instead of just getting some basic level education. In order to be successful, in my opinion, in business, you need to know a little bit about what the janitor's doing to the CEO of the company. You got to have your hands. You don't need to have your hands in everything micromanaging, but you certainly need to know each of the positions
and
along
you need
the
to
way
take
with some
responsibility.
familiarity. Steve Harvey trusted somebody, the accountant, to be paying the taxes, and lo and behold, umpteen years later, and
checks were written, stapled to
Yep.
the tax returns.
Yep.
Money was gone from the account,
Yep.
but the checks were never sent, and
But
the tax
IRS
returns were
comes
never
knocking
filed.
at the door saying, you owe like
It was like $20 million.
$20 million in back taxes.
Yeah. And he's like, what are you talking
What are you
about?
talking
I file
about?
my taxes every year.
Yeah.
Go talk to my accountant,
Oh,
who
where's the
ended up, I
accountant?
think, with a bullet in his head,
Probably
committed suicide because he had stolen $20 million in tax money from Steve Harvey and put it in his own account. And Steve's like, well, I guess I have to fix this.
Yep.
So he has a very difficult conversation with his wife. And then he said, I think it took him 6 or 7 or 8 years.
But he said yes to every
But he started saying yes to every
engagement
opportunity.
and
That's
took
right.
total complete responsibility.
That's right.
Didn't blame anybody but himself for what ended up happening. And he actually says, it's one of the things that he says is one of the greatest things that ever happened to him, because it really gave him the leverage needed to really bolster his career and because he had to say yes to every
He got really well known really
brand
fast.
name, really friendly. Everybody knows who he
Got
is.
Family
The
Feud
Family
show.
Feud, like all of these things that he would have ordinarily said no to, because he was in the position to where he had to say yes to everything. It ended up like 10xing the speed of which he was able to grow and able to not only pay off his back taxes, but also be able to become a household name that everybody knows who he is. And you wouldn't even know that it's because of the adversity. That's how
right.
you know who Steve Harvey is. You just know him because he's just this happy, friendly guy. Well, it was actually because of the adversity that he went through that we all know who he is.
So once
now.
that financial education and entrepreneurial sense of ownership kicked in, Steve Harvey started making progress. And then that's a great segue. Let's talk about how he did that. He actually did that on level 4, which was he created content.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, that content was union, Screen Actors Guild, TV shows, contracts from studios, contracts from networks,
diaper wipe commercials,
commercials, right? But he became a household name because of that adversity, and he creating content as a way of leverage. So far we've got an entrepreneurial mindset with financial education. That's the foundation of the pyramid. And then above that is labor, getting somebody else to do some work, paying them by the hour or paying them by the job, and then they go do whatever you don't have time or don't want to or do or don't have skill to do. The next level of leverage is capital, to where you're using your money to make money, hopefully in a business that you own, but investments is okay. The next is code, software code. I've sold software code at Zip2, working for Elon and Kimball. I've sold it for Cisco Systems and Oracle and CA Technologies and Intel and IBM. Software code represents in our generation really the 100x multiplier. And then now we have content creators. That's what we're doing here in this podcast. We're creating content. And it's leverage, right? Once we do the work one time, you have asymmetric return in that this will be on YouTube until YouTube goes out of business. And our children and our children's children and our children's children's children, if there's an internet and people use it, will be able to see this content and know a little bit about who their mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, great-great-grandma, and great-great-grandpa were through the creation of content. But there's another one, which is really what people are talking about the last couple of years. And I don't think it's any secret, but I don't think that this pyramid would be complete the way that it was when Naval Ravikant did it and when Alex Hermozi did the keynote speech on it, because, folks, the universe has changed and there's no going back. And there's no reason to be afraid of it. We just need to talk about it. You need to double down, triple down, quadruple down on, you guessed it, top of the pyramid, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence in 3 years has gone from nobody's really doing it to billions of people using it. It is faster adoption than any social media, any internet, smartphone, Google, times 1,000. Think about AI as a combination of other people's labor and other people's capital, which has produced other people's code in order to produce content that you can get paid to use. So the big thing people are working on right now is called agentic AI, which effectively is AI as your personal assistant. You know, will your $50,000, $100,000 a year job be taken up by AI? Possibly, and depending on industry, probably, but not all jobs. And business thinking, creative thinking, content creation can be enhanced by AI, but you still have to write the prompt. Code can be written by AI, but you still have to write the prompt. Capital can be allocated and reallocated by AI. People are doing that in day trading, but you still have to take responsibility for it. And AI will outsource a lot of labor, but the coordination of that labor still has to be written in the prompt. So will you be replaced by AI? No, but the jobs probably will be in most cases. And so you need to look at which side of that equation do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side that gets irrelevant because of AI, or do you want to make other people irrelevant with your use and your understanding of AI? And that really, in our, probably for the next 30 or 40 years, AI will be the single greatest form of leverage available to people. Common people who are making $10 an hour can afford $20 a month for ChatGPT to help educate them, to help train them. I've used it to write quizzes for myself in order to up-level areas of product. I've used it to run product strategy. I've used it to negotiate contracts. I've used it to help with taxes. I've used it to negotiate political scenarios in my job. It's extremely, extremely valuable and helpful. This is a prompt that I use in ChatGPT in almost everything, which is counterfactuals. Ray Dalio is in his mid-40s. He gets the shift in the market right, but he gets the timing on it very wrong. And he ends up losing all of his money, all of his parents' money, all of his friends' money, all of his friends' parents' money, and is basically living in his mid-40s in his parents' basement, starting over with nothing. He realizes that his fatal flaw was that he didn't ask the question, how do I know I'm not wrong? The more that I look at the Ray Dalios, the Stephen Duniers, the Warren Buffetts of this world, the more I realize that the key to their success is Warren Buffett's rule number 1, don't lose money. How do you keep from losing money? You're trying to make money, but his goal is don't lose it. If you don't lose it, you'll make it. Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, some say he's made $1 billion. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. He has done some pretty large real estate projects, and one of his quotes is take care of the downside. The upside takes care of itself. I think that as we start to look at larger dollar amounts, larger labor contracts, larger capital investments, larger code sets, bigger brands in content creation, and obviously agentic AI and the use of artificial intelligence as leverage, the bigger we get, the more we need to count the cost of the downside. So the best prompt that I could leave with you this week is take whatever prompt you're doing, take whatever approach you're doing, and then make sure and ask the counterfactual questions. And I say, ChatGPT, give me the 10 biggest reasons why I am absolutely blind to the risk associated with XYZ project failing. And I think that you will be shocked, number one, at how uncomfortable asking that question might make you in the very beginning. It made me very, very uncomfortable for probably the first year when I'm sitting there going, what's the risk? What's the downside? How could I be in trouble because of these decisions or this position in the market or whatever? And it'll tell you after the emotion clears, after you start to realize that what you're actually after is not validation in the marketplace of your brilliant idea. It's protection of capital and protection of rate of return on capital, with the most amount of upside with the least amount of of downside risk. In other words, how do I invest a nickel, never worry about risking the nickel, and get 20 nickels in return in a very short period of time? That's ultimately what you want. And when you've got that asymmetric risk shift, the only way to understand whether or not you've got asymmetric risk is understanding what your downside is, because that's your actual baseline. If you're risking 5 cents, but you make 20 nickels as a result, that's pretty good asymmetric. But if you can find a way to invest 5 cents, get the asymmetric possible upside of 20x with zero risk of the downside of the 5, I would bet on that, every dollar I had in my account.